The 8th of July, 2025, and I have reached out to Starlink, and hopefully they can come install better internet service in the next few days. I have reached out a couple of times, and so I finally caved because ExploreNet has been just too brutal. And I want to do a podcast with Austin Whitsitt, who's a friggin' legend and a genius. And I don't want that to be messed up because of, again, internet issues, because I owe him at least that. And so, anyways, before I get into this really interesting video that I was looking at yesterday, it was actually shared to me on Telegram by someone I didn't even know. And that does happen because I am on Telegram. I don't really post anything at all on it. I use it as another way to communicate with people from a semi uncensored platform. But again, they're all monitored, and so we do know that. And so I'm not naive to think that they're not. And anyways, I don't post anything illegal or criminal or anything regarding top secret government clearance, like that would require any kind of like security clearances. So look at my stuff if you want to. I'm talking to the CIA and CSIS right now, mostly joking, but not. So anyway, I wanted to get into some international news updates before I get into this incredible video that I came across, and of course I'm going to start with Canada because I'm Canadian, obviously, and this was a really great speech.
When farming is socialized, you get bread lines, and people died of starvation while standing in Soviet bread lines. When healthcare is socialized, you get lines in the ER, and I promise you, people have died and are dying in waiting rooms, in emergency rooms across this country right now.
He's a doctor.
You might think that I'm being overwrought and seeing the ghost of communism where it does not exist. However, I would note that we just spent 10 years with a prime minister who, when asked which government in the world he most admired, stated the basic dictatorship of the Communist Chinese Party.
Just wait.
A prime minister who released a statement lionizing brutal communist dictator Fidel Castro when he died. A prime minister whose answer to every social problem, dental care, child care, pharmacare, school lunch, climate change, what have you, was always more socialism, more central planning, more top-down pronouncements, less freedom to make choices for yourself and your family. The zenith of all this top-down control came during the pandemic. The members opposite went full communism. They locked Canadians down in their homes. They ruined weddings, funerals, Easters, proms, and Christmases. They closed the borders. They kept mothers from children and brothers from sisters. They deprived this house of its ancient rights. They spent $600 billion of taxpayer money with no budget, doubled our national debt to pay healthy 16-year-olds to sit in their basement. Then, as now, they did all this in the name of crisis management. Physicians, professors, and journalists who spoke out against these abuses were hunted down. They had their licenses and their jobs threatened. I know this because it happened to me. At Queen's University, where I taught, Jane Philpott herself, one of the only two cabinet ministers to speak truth to Justin Trudeau's power, informed me in her dean's office that the reason the administration had to harass me was that I criticized the government. That is a direct quote. Of course, the prime minister and his commissars were immune from all of this. He could attend gatherings of greater than 5 if it suited his political purposes, like a George Floyd protest in Ottawa, and he did. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals claimed unto themselves the power to censor the news, to violate free speech in the name of fighting misinformation, while they themselves promoted misinformation. They gave luxurious contracts to their friends in academia. These three institutions, but under the federal government's bribery scheme, they have ended up, like the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, out to sea, stewing in each other's bathwater. When ordinary, everyday Canadians came here to Ottawa complaining that their charter rights to bodily autonomy, assembly, and free movement were being violated, every member of the Liberal caucus voted to trample their rights further. They violated Section 2 and Section 8 of the Charter in imposing the Emergencies Measures Act. It is not me saying that, but Justice Mosley of the Federal Court. They trampled on the charter rights they claimed to revere, and then they laughed about it. The current Minister of Transport, in particular, laughed about it, Mr. Speaker.
True.
If we cannot speak truth to their power, everything will continue to break. And that is why I had to come here, Mr. Speaker. I refuse to be a cog in their broken machine. When farming is socialized, you get...
That was such a good post. And again, communism, it's so popular now, and I don't understand why people are actually voting for communist parties, even in the Ottawa area, specifically in the PN2. I shared that there were a few thousand people that were voting for it. People are thinking that this is some kind of an edgy new regime, that could be implemented better. It's and again, it's just wild to me. And so I'm going to share this afterwards. I don't know if it's going to be up on my Instagram yet, but it's a reshare. But before I even get into that stuff, Bill S206, that we really need to take a look at. I'm going to share some other information. So this pediatrician was fired. That's an update to that. She fired for a vile post suggesting Texas flood victims were Trump supporters who got what they voted for. Again, children don't vote. And there were so many more people too that were trying to make this about race, and so many other disgusting posts that were put up. And but anyways, people are getting reported and they are getting fired. So I definitely wanted to share this.
I'm glad I waited on making this video. If you're like me, you saw this come across your newsfeed last night
All over the news.
and was wondering, how could this be? How could the FBI drop a memo in the middle of the night last night claiming that Epstein was not murdered? He did control alt delete himself. He had no client list. I was about to do an entire breakdown of everything about this that was BS with proof. Like I said, I'm glad that I waited because I noticed that there's no timestamp, there's no signature block, there's no nothing. It's just a bunch of words, bunch of mumbo jumbo.
A few moments later.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
And it's gone.
What?
It's gone. It's all gone.
What's all gone?
The Axios leaked memo is no longer on the website. The DOJ is not showing this memo anywhere on there at all. So, A, either somebody released it too early and they didn't have a time to sign it, so they had to pull it down, or B, somebody's fucking with this, or C, somebody fucked up and told a lie about a truth we all know to be real. Because, like I said, I went back to old court documents back to 2019 and 2020, where Judge Allison Nathan was the one in charge of Ghislaine Maxwell's black book, and so is Jeffrey Epstein's black book from another judge, but I can't find anything on that anymore. She's the one who had her record sealed, and we're all saying, cool. So there's no client list, there's no blackmailing, so Ghislaine Maxwell's in prison for 20 years to trafficking minors to nobody. Got it. So until one of the three stooges come out and say something, Bongino, Patel, and Bondi, the wet dish rags they try to fucking be, we'll just call this a very clever, detailed fake to throw off
Maybe
the general public, because we're never going to let this go. We're like a pit bull humping your leg or a Rottweiler with a bone. Just give us what we want, and we'll go away. I'm glad I waited on making this video.
Yeah, so a lot of people shared it, and it obviously has since been removed. It could be because there was a lot of backlash and there was a lot of questions about it, and rightfully so, obviously. And so, was this an intentional plant? Was this by the official government that was doing this? Who knows? Again, we need to look more into this. Is there a list? Yes, there is. Does it involve major players that are celebrities, that are politicians, elected officials included in that, and so many other people? Yes, there is. Are these blackmail bribery schemes? Yes, they are as well. And so I posted this last year, but it's something that I had been talking about for many years. And just full disclosure, actually, I want to see if my mute button's on. Okay, it's not good. Did political theater of sexual misconduct allegations pave way to implement vaccine mandates in Canadian armed forces? And so what some people don't know is that during the 2020-2021 period, there was a huge court case involving multiple different members, mostly females within the Canadian armed forces or working with them, that were suing the government, so taxpayers, for different sexual assault misconduct allegations. And there absolutely were a few that were absolutely horrific and real and true. Unfortunately, which is why people were approaching me to be part of this court case, and I'm like, I'm not going to sue the taxpayers for this, right? Some people had been held accountable already for things that had happened to me, and I have a pension, and there's so many other things. And again, I put myself in the lion's den. And so what happened was, when I was dealing with sexual assault or misconduct incidences in my career, and I did deal with a lot of them because I was the first female PPCLI infantry officer in the history of the regiment, and it wasn't easy, but again, I put myself in the lion's den. So what I did was I made myself a hard target. And so when I was speaking about that, about how you can make yourself, again, a hard target, and do certain things within battalions or within units, to make it where we are safer, again, that was completely dismissed. And there were people that were part of that case that I know for a fact were lying. I know for a fact were lying. And they didn't want to even say names because they didn't have names. And they were saying things like, oh, the AC was too cold. And people were likely doing that to make it where our, again, I'm being graphic, but like our nipples would get hard. And they were they were claiming that was sexual misconduct and stuff like that. Absolutely ridiculous in my humble opinion, or that hugs were too long, or that they felt uncomfortable conversating with men if the doors were closed, et cetera, et cetera. And again, to me, like, this was just absolutely ridiculous, and it really painted people within the Canadian Armed Forces, like the men especially, as these predators. And again, they were targeting men that I knew that like there were so many lies against these men that were heroes, men with decades of legendary service, like General Vance, and again, they were lumped into this as well. And there were women that were admitting that they were like, we're just doing it for the money, we're just doing it for the money, and I can't name who, unfortunately, at this point, because again, uh, it's still in the courts for certain other things that I'm speaking on. But people like Mercedes Stevenson, who I had shared information with regarding COVID, people that were part of this mass court case. I mass emailed everyone, and I was saying, like, why, while people are being distracted by this during this time, there are people that are your subordinates. Because again, a lot of, like, there were several really high ranking female officers that were also, again, this was a witch hunt. I'm going to be clear. There was a witch hunt largely, when a lot of these cases could have been handled individually and not so public, because again, like, you're re-victimizing people as well, and using them for propaganda. And again, it was disgusting to me. So like, people that were actual victims, I think were being exploited, unfortunately, and the people being part of the court case that were watering it down with nonsensical allegations that could not even be proven. And again, and these were things that they were saying happened, like, again, decades ago. And so people within their chain of command at the lower levels were getting kicked out. They were getting harassed. They were getting forced to be inoculated, or again, they would lose their pensions, their careers, etc. And again, I know people personally that were kicked out while pregnant because they refused the inoculation for COVID. Multiple other shots and vaccines, by the way. Even my immunization booklet is full, right? But informed consent would have been necessary, and I was part of the Methylquin mass tort as well since, like, at least 2018. And again, these were forced anti-malarial drugs that were pushed on multiple people within the Canadian Armed Forces that were already banned. They were already banned in multiple other countries, and extremely significant adverse side effects. And again, this was being pushed, and so, like, people were needed to be aware of that. And we're still waiting for our time in court. And this was delayed because of the pandemic. And I think that was by design, because again, we wanted to change policies. I never wanted any money from any of these court cases being put forward regarding Methylquin. And I even have the emails to substantiate that this was about changing policies within the Canadian Armed Forces and within the government. And so people were used and exploited and manipulated. And so I was sharing information regarding COVID, and I'm like, you could focus on that right now, because people are actively right now being victimized by you and your chain of command, ladies, mostly ladies. And this is what you're focusing on during a pandemic. Okay, cool. And again, it's not pretty. I had people calling me up, accusing me of stolen valor. Oh my God. And obviously from a private number. One chick, like 10 or 11 p.m. at night one night. And again, I'd served 15 years as an infantry officer. And then as soon as I got out, I incorporated, and I was working with the highest levels of government, multiple different organizations, to be of service to Canada at home and abroad. So international contracts as well. And so I'm like, you could do a simple Google search, lady. She didn't want to give her name, and to accuse me of stolen valor, you dumb fuck. When I've actually gone through my own shit, being part of the Canadian Armed Forces, and then even afterwards, it was just ridiculous to me. And anyway, that's my garden. Peppers, squash, tomatoes, lettuce, cucumbers, beets, and so many vegetables. Got some kale in there as well. sort of show the hidden lettuce in the background, but anyway. Yeah, so I was out weeding the garden again yesterday. Oh my God, I love it. Eggs for my sister's chickens, some of my flowers. Okay, so this is from Hustle Bitch. Holy shit, Texas cloud seeding CEO funded by Peter Thiel connected to Palantir. Meet Augustus Dorico, a 25-year-old tech bro and Thiel fellow who founded the weather modification startup Rainmaker. According to publicly available info, Dorico's company was reportedly cloud seeding over parts of Texas just 2 days before historic flooding hit those same regions. He received $100,000 through Peter Thiel's fellowship, the same Thiel who co-founded Palantir, the surveillance and defense tech giant, tracking everything from troop movement to civilian behavior. And I think that people like Sean Ryan, in fact, I know people like Sean Ryan are tracking this, and they've asked him to comment. He's obviously denying this is taking place. But if you look at my video from yesterday, again, further investigations need to be done because who he's connected to now as well. But I'll get into that in a second because Morgan J. Freeman, come on. This guy who I friggin' thought was an amazing actor, great voice, etc. And then I get this friggin' post. I see this post. This is literally him. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, okay, this has got to be a fake account. It is not. It was him. This is what he posted a few days ago on the 5th of July. We are actively working towards seeking asylum in Canada, a country that cares about its people, not a shithole like the USA. And I just couldn't even believe that he said that. And so my comment to him was, you really don't know anything about Canada, laugh out loud. You can't claim asylum because he can't be an American. You entitled millionaire. And there's even that. So even if you like try to claim like asylum for whatever reason from the US to Canada, which you can't do, you are a millionaire. You can literally move anywhere you want in the friggin' world, or even in the US. You could buy a friggin' island and just live there, you moron. Oh my God. And we have a king. So you see it says no kings on his freaking profile picture here, which is like nonsensical to me. Like he has no idea how Canada works. We are a constitutional monarchy, whatever you want to call it. We should be a constitutional republic, in my humble opinion, just like the US, but anyways. And so we have a king. We have a king. And then he's definitely on the same lists you claim Trump is on. I do think Trump is on those lists, but I also think that the King Charles, is on those same friggin' lists. And so, oh my God, this guy, and the U.S., for whatever they're going through right now. And again, there are many things that I don't trust about the Trump government, but I will say there's a lot of information coming out that we would have never gotten had Kamala Harris won, right? And he was, when you look at the pros and cons, a superior option to Kamala Harris. So if you think that there's a shit show now going on in the US and internationally, you think it would be actually better with Kamala Harris, then you are mistaken. Respectfully speaking, you are mistaken. And talking about lists, the people that she had supporting her campaign that are part of these same friggin' lists. And then again, it's not an accident that like the Epstein list, oh, magically there's no one on the list, and Diddy, like found not guilty. Like this is just, and the prosecution, again, this is a circus. This is just, again, to appease the masses and then be like, oh no, they're both innocent, or everyone's innocent. No. And it's Comey's daughter that again was part of this, and she was part of the Ghislaine Maxwell case as well. And so again, it's smoke and mirrors, just like respectfully speaking with Alex Jones and the Sandy Hook court hearings. It's just, and then even with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, like this was a clown show just to appease the masses and give us something for like some kind of entertainment, and people are falling for it, unfortunately. Yeah, so just wild to me. So again, back to Rainmaker. The owner of Rainmaker is denying the allegations, but his company operates within the area that was affected. And I did show that. I showed the NOAAs. I showed the contracts. I showed the locations that even where Care County is, it's within 24 miles of the areas they were operating in. And so they can't claim that wasn't happening because, again, the contracts are out there. And I did share the PDFs and the NOAA website that you can look at yourself. So take a look at it. So anyways, the owner of Rainmaker is denying the allegations, but his company operates within the area that was affected, and this is record-breaking flooding. He needs to be investigated. All the flight logs, emails, messages, etc., but I'm sure they have been deleted or scrubbed. He's connected to Palantir and Peter Thiel, so this can easily be buried, which is frustrating, right? So the people that he's operating with, they can easily help him bury this stuff. Like they're experts in that, and it's just unfortunate. And he's going to lie to people, I'm sure. He's likely going to go on the Sean Ryan show and claim innocence, etc., and how Rainmaker is an amazing company. We're competing with China, and there's mass droughts and stuff like that. You are fucking with the weather. Fucking with the weather. And if this is some kind of a contained environment, a gaseous pressurized environment, whatever you want to call it, then there's no way out of this. And these are ramifications that are going to be felt for many years.
How many times did I tell you guys I don't post shit without
Speaking about Epstein.
how many times did I tell you guys I don't post shit without double checking it or fact checking myself? I don't post wrong information. This is from the footage they released this morning of the CCTV 10-hour footage they claimed they didn't have back in 2020. This is the front of his cell door. Want to prove it to you? Screen recorded directly from the page dated 2020 from CNN of Epstein's cell. What's going to be down here underneath this right here? Just wait for it. Oh, look, there's his fucking cell door from 2020.
The window in it.
Jesus Christ. You can literally Google this yourself. Look up his cell door from 2020. Then you look at the video footage they released today. At the bottom of that hyperlink, they're claiming this is the footage that they have from the CCTV of his cell block. Tell me again how I'm fucking wrong. Again, CNN, dated 2020. Google this yourself. While at the bottom of this page, scrolling from here, inside of his cell, more conversation, his suicide note, and then womp womp, his fucking cell door that has windows. This is the one they're claiming is from his cell door that has no windows. So how are they going to do suicide watch when you can't open these doors for anything unless to feed them or take them out if they hurt themselves? How are they going to do that? There's no window to watch him through. Womp womp. I don't like this guy very much, but he was spot on calling us out. The cell door from 2020, the cell door from the footage. Tell me again how I'm wrong.
Don't worry,
And there's even a like a time lapse within the footage they released too. I think it was like the 11:58 or the 11:59 to the 2 o'clock period where it's just removed, and then even on the right hand side of the screen the logo is actually removed, and so even the footage that they've released, it has been edited and altered.
wait.
How many times did I tell you
Probably
guys?
knows that too.
Every purchase over $1,000 will be
Okay, I'm only sharing this because I've seen this. First of all, this was shared to me multiple times, and there are a lot of other people reporting on this. And I'm going to say, just like Mario was saying, it's fake news.
automatically reported to the CRA starting January 20th, 2026.
I just want to go to
Every purchase over $1,000 will be automatically reported to the CRA starting January 20th, 2026. Under a new regulation quietly passed as part of the Fair Tax Compliance Act, all major retailers and financial institutions in Canada will be required to transmit details of transactions over $1,000 directly to the Canada Revenue Agency.
It's fake. It's fake news. It's not real. There's no such thing as the Fair Compliance Act. And if you actually think about it, the transactions that would be passed to the CRA, what if I used $1,000 cash? They're not going to know who I am. It's fake. Plain and simple. There's no reporting to the CRA for transactions over $1,000.
over $1,000 too, and I mean even friggin' furniture at this point and grocery bills are like now because of all the friggin' taxes and the increase in cost of living for literally everything. A lot of things now are over $1,000. So like what like the CRA is going to be like they're going to be the busiest ever in the world in Canada. Makes no sense.
Hope this helps.
But yeah, cash is king, and I think that people
Every purchase over $1,000
because this digital like the digital currency stuff that's being implemented by Carney, again it's for more surveillance and control over the population, and what if there's blackouts and power outages, etc. Like again, like people still need some kind of like a finite resource like gold or silver or cash in order to purchase items. So there's more people speaking out regarding state-funded media. The CBC is the propaganda arm of the Liberal Party. So CBC host Travis O'Hanray resigns after revealing that he was being denied the opportunity to book conservative voices on his show. So he said that he could not continue at public broadcaster with integrity. And so, of course, it's not showing up. But maybe if I refresh this. But I do want to hammer down on what's going on in Canada with Bill S206. Okay, here we go. Because I've shared this with multiple different people, including Mario. But again, he doesn't he probably gets like a million people that are reaching out to him on a daily basis. Why is this not? And so I'm not expecting him to like read what anyway, it's not popping up here, but I'll just pause it. So I said I'm sharing this again because no one else is reporting this yet. So this is from the real Mr. Bench. Guaranteed Livable Basic Income Bill S206 will be coming to Canada in the near future. The plan is anyone aged 17 years and older will qualify. Universal Basic Income (UBI), and this is again going to be at the House for its third reading, I believe it is, in September of this year. And this is going to stifle innovation. This is going to stifle industry. It's going to make there's an increase in unemployment. So again, this is not going to help anyone. This is a communist agenda, and it's never worked. And I will reiterate, it stifles industry, it stifles the economy, it stifles progress, etc. And so I think I hit the major ones here. And so I'll stop sharing. Okay, I already stopped sharing, which is good. And I'm gonna get into this freaking video because it's wild to me. It's very interesting. And so I'm going to tag the link to the actual video from ALGN Radio, and I'm going to take a look at this person's work more. But again, this video is very interesting. I watched almost all of it so far.
This film is a portrait of a man who has devoted his life to the flying of aircraft, as a United States Air Force pilot and as a captain of commercial jet airliners. It is Captain Field McConnell's personal story and his perspective on the events of September 11th. This isn't the full story of 911, but McConnell speaks about what he knows best: airplanes, their flight, and their control. His thoughts, ideas, and concepts are delivered spontaneously and unscripted. He is not a professional actor, nor a practiced press agent or politician. His concepts are illustrated with symbol and silent metaphor, so the lessons of that day may be simply understood and applied universally. In the year following the initial release of this film, McConnell's observations have been corroborated by a growing number of professional pilots. His principal ideas are supported by the data and research released by a growing number of physicists, engineers, intelligence analysts, and flight control workers, as well as an army of citizen witnesses. Not the least important of new discoveries, in January of 2008, World Trade Center dust sample analysis by 4 independent laboratories, including the U.S. Geological Survey, all confirm the presence of materials consistent with the use of controlled building demolition incendiaries and/or extreme high-temperature explosives. The creators of this film come from different backgrounds and different slices of the political pie, and we have drawn both at times similar and other times divergent conclusions about what these facts add up to. No matter, for all of us, 911 remains relevant and worthy of continued discussion.
9/11 in 1 minute. 9/11's been solved. It was a double hijacking. Canadian intelligence services found out that Al Qaeda was thinking of doing something on 9/11. So the Canadian intelligence services shared what they wished to with the Americans, but they took advantage of the Muslims, and the Canadians actually piggybacked on the attacks. And the Canadians, using high technology, allowed the Muslims to appear to physically take the aircraft, when actually the aircraft were in fact hijacked electronically through the QRS-11 gyroscope, which is a gyro chip, and some other technologies that could create false voices. So the media fairy tale of 9/11 is nowhere near the truth, and we would like to share the truth with you. And now in this movie, we believe we've told you the truth of 9/11.
Who is Captain Sherlock? This is Neil Slade, the director of this documentary. About a year and a half ago, I was introduced to the idea that the events that occurred on 9/11 were not told truthfully and complete, as reported by the general media, and that the overall public perception of the events were largely fictional and incomplete. Like most people presented with ideas outside the conventional wisdom of this event, I was at first totally skeptical. I then viewed a DVD lecture by physicist Dr. Stephen Jones of Brigham Young University, not exactly the hotbed of controversial and radical conspiracy theories. Nevertheless, in this methodical presentation, he clearly demonstrates the scientific evidence that all three World Trade Center buildings collapsed, not from plane impact and subsequent fire damage, but from a deliberate, pre-planned demolition that was timed to coincide exactly with the attacks that occurred on 9/11. Shortly after viewing Dr. Jones's DVD presentation, I contacted him personally. And because of my history and background in teaching and in writing about brain and behavior science, he personally invited me to join a private group known as Scholars for 911. Here we discussed controversies, theories, and details of 911 online on a private internet forum with members from all professional disciplines. It was on this forum that I met David Hawkins, whose own ideas about 911 brought much controversy to the group early on, but which I later found to be the most logical and well thought out. And in fact, he was the only person to address and then answer the riddles that to this day remain undiscovered by the majority of 911 sleuths. David's bio can be found on his website, hawkscafe.com. Additionally, I later arranged for him to do national public radio interviews after our meeting. But briefly here, let me say that he has a first-class honors degree in mechanical engineering, Cambridge University, a diploma in industrial management, Cambridge University, and received a foundation scholarship from Queen's College, Cambridge University for outstanding academic performance in applied mathematics and thermodynamics, which is the science of waste and chaos. This is just the tip of the iceberg regarding his qualifications and experience, which includes the use and placement of explosives, as well as the diagnosis of natural disasters, accidents, or violent crime, and the causes of such. I quickly became well acquainted with David, and after a period of months, finally came to understand the details of his analysis that provides key answers to the motives, money, and methods used on 911 outlined and presented in this film. His image remains absent from this film and even his website because David sees his contribution and role in solving this mystery as Sherlock Holmes described himself, as a disembodied brain whose appearance and image is irrelevant and would only serve as a distraction from the complete events and tragedies of 911, for which popularly the so-called and identified Muslim hijackers have been given the complete blame, which is a scientific and physical impossibility. Several months ago, David met through the internet retired Air Force Top Gun pilot and large commercial jet pilot Field McConnell. After a short correspondence with David and careful review of his material, McConnell, with his 35 years of expert perspective as a pilot, felt that Hawkins had cracked the case, and that Hawkins' logic and reasoning were solid and sound. McConnell decided to quit his job as an airline pilot for both ethical and legal reasons, and in fact decided to take the matter to court to recover what would be his lost wages. Field states that he was forced into retirement by agencies and plane manufacturers that would not answer his simple questions regarding the safety of their current plane fleet. In March of 2007, McConnell came to my location to make our film together, and we then proceeded to film hour after hour of testimony, related images, and demonstration so that we could then share the information with the general public, who to this day remains largely in the dark concerning the facts about what really happened on 911 and how it happened. What you are seeing is selected portions from our 3 days of intense documentation and explanation, as well as illustrations of points that span several months. Captain Sherlock is not any one specific person, but the name we have chosen to give to the team of contributors who have collectively unraveled and exposed the unanswered crimes of 911. We do not all agree on every single point, like any group of individuals with a common goal, but agree on the major points of unassailable integrity and physical reality. You too can be Captain Sherlock as you discover the truth and then reveal the truth to your friends, family, and coworkers.
Military area is to my left, but I don't have my uniform, so I think I'll stay in the civilian area if that's okay with you. Some of those people apparently had some money because there's some very big mausoleums here. That's the correct one. If you're afraid of security issues, you'll succumb to security issues. And I think the best defense is a overwhelming offense. So that's why I always send out email messages about the people I'm going to send email messages right before for instance, I recently sent an email to the FBI official, and before I sent the email to the FBI, I put it on the internet and posted it around the globe. I think that honest people don't have to be afraid of anything, and therefore, if you're honest, you can go ahead and communicate openly. How do you feel about that, Mr. Anderson?
Just call me Deep Throat.
Okay, Linda. I don't know if the voice is going to. This reminds me a lot of a '65 Lotus.
That's what it is.
Hence the similarity. Well, I don't see any funerals, so I guess rather than attend a funeral, we'll just drive around and look some more.
Yeah.
I'm more of a peaceful person, but sometimes I get put into positions where you can't be peaceful, and so then you either have to be a victim or a victor. And I've decided that being a victim is not a very good deal, so rather than start things, I'm a finisher. Like in baseball, they have finishers that somebody else pitches for 7.5 innings and the finisher goes in. So here it is, 5.5 years after 9/11, and I'm hoping to finish this off for the 3,000 victims. There's Morrison, but I don't think it's Jim Morrison. I see a cannon coming up.
Yeah.
A bunch of patriots. Bunch of patriots. Looks like Francis Brown Lowry, the person after which Lowry Air Force Base was probably named.
Yep, exactly.
And I'm thinking World War I because of the rifle and the ammo and the pot on his head. I think we need more patriots like this and less patriot acts. It's not an act, it's a way of life. My father was actually stationed at Lowry Air Force Base back in the late 40s after he came back from World War II, and he was flying B-25s here at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver. So no matter where you go, you're connected to something, in this case, I have a familial relationship with this Sergeant, I suppose. I don't see any insignia of rank, but he's carrying a rifle, and had he been an officer, he more likely would have had a pistol. So I wonder how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of patriots over the years have gone to their deaths so that our freedoms could be perpetuated. And it's those same freedoms that I find that are so much at risk now in 2007. I don't believe there's such thing as the two-party system anymore. In fact, in 1892, there was a banker's manifesto that was written where they sat at a table in Omaha, and European money sat there and tried to figure out how to enslave Americans. And three of the four tenets of the slavery were mortgages, two-party system, and poor public education. And I think they've achieved those three. And the fourth one has to do with church. And frankly, I can't remember it, not because I don't go to church, but just because I'm getting old enough to where I occasionally forget things. But anyone can find the text on the Bankers Manifesto of 1892. And it probably wouldn't be public knowledge if Congressman Lindbergh from Minnesota hadn't shared it with the public back around 1913, 1927, right in there.
You can draw your picture and
Okay, every one of these flights, there were four flights, and they all had a decoy airplane. In this case, the decoy was the real United 93. Right behind it was the same platform. In other words, it would have been a drone 757. The point being that everybody near the Capitol, if this hit the Capitol, they would have said, yep, we saw it. It was a United 757. And it would have had United paint. And it could have been a 757. It would have been an unmanned drone. And up here, watching this whole thing, would be a little bitty white jet called the CL-144. No markings, pure white. Very small. The CL-144 would be able to look down at the drone and the decoy and tell the people that were controlling them, which I allege is over here off the coast. There's two AWACS. Okay, and the AWACS is called E3A if it's American, but these were NATO AWACS. They're sitting out in international airspace controlling these two. In other words, they got radio waves going to this, radio waves going to that. But just from experience, I believe the purpose of the CL-144 is simply to be an eyeball. In other words, once the AWACS takes control of the decoy and the drone, perhaps the 144 will say, give me a left 30, in which case both the decoy and the drone turn left 30. And then he says, give me a right 30. And they can do a right 30. And then the eyeball guy would say, okay, you can take the decoy out over the water and destroy it, and you can send the drone to the target. Yeah. So you really, when they talk about one airplane, you're really talking about four. You got the decoy, the drone, the visual observer, and NATO AWACS. And there was a NATO AWACS off Washington, and there was one off New York City.
Well, can they say that the NATO planes were involved in the
exercise? Yeah, they sure could. Boeing Aircraft has developed an uninterruptible autopilot. The tamper-proof autopilot system that allows the crew members or a agency such as the FAA or military to electronically control the airliner through the QRS-11 gyro chip, and the signals to the airliner are sent via satellite to the aircraft itself, which then will be landed safely at any destination selected by the controlling agency. June 1st and 2nd, 2001, Amalgam Virgo, U.S. military war game with Canadian intelligence. This is the dry run in the summer before 9/11 to show off and test the anti-hijack system being sold to the United States. Amalgam Virgo 01 was an air defense exercise created intellectually in Canada and foisted upon the U.S. Air Force and Department of Defense. It presumed that Osama bin Laden may use drones and cruise missiles to attack high-value targets in the United States of America, and it suggested that F-15s and F-16s from the U.S. Air Force would be the counters to those types of attacks. Slide 2 shows NORAD, which is North American Air Defense Fighters, and their exercise charter. Most of it's pretty standard, but what caught my attention on this page is that perceived is in big letters and a different color than the rest of it. And I think it's the intention of the three-card Monte operators behind Amalgam Virgo to put in our minds that the threats are Osama bin Laden, cruise missiles, and drones. The Canadian intelligence folks that put together this confusing exercise, Amalgam Virgo, intentionally inserted a gray area here. The gray area that was intentionally created in the planning for Amalgam Burgo would be used with great effect on the later global guardian of 9/11. It always introduced questions as to who is responsible for what and who is in charge of putting the response into motion. Designers, the perpetrators of 9/11, intentionally made it very easy for people to be confused, and this slide in front of you shows the confusion. There's multiple poor choices made, and no one is going to be responsible because the responsibility will be distributed across a lot of bad choices, and there will be nobody in charge. It's a Canadian accent. That one over there is marked. It's got green around its neck.
It's got its own territory, that landscape. And all of 9/11 is connected in the same way that all these valleys are connected.
Good evening. How may I help you? Okay. Oh, okay. Have you already gone up? Okay, Okay, well, if something bad happens, at least we have footage for you, Mom. Yeah. Hi, I'm on Lowry Air Force Base in Colorado, and I'm standing before a B-52 Stratofortress. And the bomber that predated the B-52 was the B-47 Stratojet. And my family history is that my father flew both the B-47s from 1951 to 1959, and then from 1963 through 1971, my father flew B-52s and KC-135 tankers. So I've been around Boeing aircraft since I was born, literally. I was born in 1949, and from 1951 until 1971, my father was involved in the deployment of Boeing assets, Boeing B-52s, Boeing KC-135 tankers, and the Boeing B-47 Stratojet before that. And so I am firsthand aware of much of the history of these bombers. The B-47, in fact, was droned in 1953. It was droned by Boeing aircraft, and that singular model was called the MB-47, and it was designed to fly without a human crew and to carry a hydrogen bomb over a great distance. Later, was morphed into a QB-47, which was a drone B-47. And there was an incident in June of 1963 where a QB-47 being recovered at an aux field or an auxiliary airfield at Tyndall Air Force Base became uncontrollable in the final approach and actually crashed and caused several people to lose their lives. Those people were people that just happened to be driving by in their automobile at the wrong place at the wrong time. Recently, in 2007, there's been some confusion of whether Boeing airplanes can be droned. And let me clear up the confusion. Going back to 54 years ago, yes, Boeing airplanes can be droned.
Okay, is that normal for a plane to have wrinkled skin like that?
Are you talking about the wrinkled skin below the Air Force and ahead of the wing?
Yes.
Yes, and that's caused by pressure changes as any pressurized airplane climbs in altitude. Here we're at 5,000 feet, and this Boeing B-52 behind me, if it were capable of taking off today and climbing to 37,000 feet, the size of the airplane would actually expand, and that sheet metal, that skin of the airplane would actually expand, and then when you come back down and there's more pressure on the airplane, it would compact. It's as if you had a can of empty Coke can or Pepsi can, and you sort of crushed it. That's what we're looking at here, and that's from the changes in pressure over a great pressure schedule, as they call it, with airplanes such as this they have large cabins, or in this case bomb bays. They have to keep the airplane pressurized for the crew, and yet when you come back down, the size of the airplane changes, inducing wrinkles. Nothing on this static display, foot stomper, static display air show, but they wanted somebody with experience, so I got drafted, and I really didn't want to go. I'm busy enough, and I have a kid. But they asked me, they said, would you do our unit a favor, and would you take the F4 out there so these kids don't go out and have a problem? Poor choice. Yeah, so I said, yeah, I'll go out there with the F4, and I'll do the air show, and I'll sit there and answer questions. Well, when I arrived at Bozeman, if you want to go to a good air show, you need an Air Force advisor. So he was active duty major who was getting out in 10 days to 2 weeks. And I'm talking to the boom operator, and I looked right at him like I'm looking at you, and I said, hey, Boomer, I said, you look really old. Is it true once the noise wheel comes off, if I light the burners and go right towards you? He said, no, that'd be great. That's what we did. And then we sort of felt how there's no way to read how to do this. This was do it the first time. And the aircraft commander thought the most he could handle was 250. Practice for about 5 minutes. But he, as the aircraft commander, he said, I can only give you about 250. Now, I know that you'll see he later went 350. But for the air refueling portion, you'll see us coming from. And this is, it's really remarkable that this video is here, because I didn't know anybody was shooting video. And thinking back to when you're on active duty, you wouldn't dare do that, would you? No, nobody would. But we went out. You know, that's the funny thing. About 2 weeks after the air show, literally a brown envelope came, and right now, as soon as why don't we walk out together? I'll hand it to you. Or where can I find you? I'll go get it right now. Yeah, let me turn that off. During the Amalgam-Virgo war game of June 1 and 2 of 2001, the routine called for all of U.S. airspace to come completely under the command of the former attacking Red Team. That is to say, Canadian intelligence and their Air Force, here shown as a CF-18. For 24 hours, the Canadians would suddenly switch sides, and the U.S. Air Force would completely stand down and surrender protection of the U.S. to NATO and the Canadian air teams and their anti-hijacking formula. This scenario was replayed again with even greater complication and confusion during the multiple war games in play on the morning of 9/11, again with Canadian forces and NATO alone in controlling skies over America during the Global Guardian war games of September 11th. It is known that on the morning of 9/11, as many as 20 independent war game scenarios were being played out, with the U.S. Air Force grounded during the Canadian Blue Air time. It was during this time that the Twin Towers were struck, the Pentagon was struck, and there was an attempt to fly a plane into the Capitol, aborted over the skies of Pennsylvania as Flight 93 was vaporized into nothingness that morning. The military and ultimately public perception has been prepared, conditioned, and neatly put into a virtual mind box in which their attention and ability to effectively respond to any real threat was limited and restricted. The vision of threats to America and protection of its citizens was playing out like a card trick, where the participants were unknowingly being misdirected and controlled by the real operators behind the game. What am I going to talk about? But that's not what I'm here for today. All I know is one thing: QRS-11 gyroscope.
Yeah.
And if the FBI or the Alpha or Boeing aircraft can tell me the QRS-11s are gone, then I fold my tent and go back into oblivion.
Come on, Dave, pick up the phone.
Please leave a short message. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
David, it's Neil. Call me back. I want to record you. I have some.
Hello, folks. If you're in the United States or Canada or anywhere in the world, you've heard a story about 9/11 that's been told by the major media, and frankly, that story is a dog. As you can see, right here, this looks like a 757 that hit the Pentagon, but is it or isn't? Let's investigate. Well, you may believe that because you've been told that, but which one's a 757? The one you've been told or the one that you couldn't see? And also, regardless of what hit the Pentagon, Wedge 1, Captain Gerald DeCanto's office, is it possible that this airplane could fly the maneuver that it was alleged to have been flying on that day? According to the official transcript of the incident, the three-dimensional flight path of the object that hit the Pentagon was somewhat like this. It flew over the Pentagon at 7,000 feet. Thereupon, it started a right wing down, very nose low descent at 540 miles an hour, rolled out just inside the grassy knoll, descended to 15 feet, went between four wooden reels, and struck the Pentagon here. And that location on the Pentagon was the Naval Command Center, where Captain Gerald DeCanto was on the phone inside his office at the Naval Command Center when whatever the object was flew into his office and killed him. Gerald DeCanto was reaching for the phone to call one of his superiors requesting to engage the target that was attacking the Pentagon because they had broken the rules of engagement on that day. Gerald DeCanto was reaching for the phone to call one of his superiors requesting to engage the target that was attacking the Pentagon because they had broken the rules of engagement on that day. There were multiple air defense exercises going on, and the rules of engagement called for the limitation of the threatening aircraft, which would have been, when it got to 3 minutes of the Pentagon, it was supposed to abort its attack and knock off the fight. But that's not what happened on that day. When the flying object got to 25 miles, it pressed the attack. Captain Gerald DeCanto determined that there was a double cross going on, and Gerald DeCanto tried to reach somebody in authority to allow him to launch defensive weapons.
At the tone, please record your voice message. When you are finished recording, you may hang up or press pound for more options.
Theo, it's Neil. Call me, okay? As soon as you've had your coffee and you're all up and awake and you fed your cows, call me up. I have a few questions I wanted to ask you. And check your email.
Left.
We're going to wrap it
Left
up.
Washington,
today.
D.C. and turned to the west.
So
climbed to an altitude in the 30,000 feet. It leveled off.
Bye.
Shortly after it leveled off, heading west towards California, a second airplane flew in right behind it in a formation such as this, within the range of 400 to 700 feet, so as to be invisible to radar. And the second airplane was a drone. There were no humans in it. There was not a cockpit crew, and there were certainly no passengers. And its purpose was to be right behind Flight 77 until such a time as the coordinated simultaneously attacks on the World Trade Center, the U.S. Capitol, and the Pentagon were assured. And the third airplane was the CL-144, which a lot of you in North America and the West recognize as an RJ built by CL Bombardier. Notice it's white. There's no letters, there's no numbers, there's no identification, and there's no flag. And so what was this mysterious white airplane that was flying behind the drone when the drone was flying behind Captain Chick Burlingame?
Hang on, my phone's gone off, so I think I know who that is.
Hi, David.
Hey, David? Yeah. In fact, I'm talking to him right now. So if you give us 3 to 5 minutes max, I'll be done with Neil and he'll be done with me, I think.
Yeah, and then I need to call David.
Okay, and he's going to call you right
Or
away.
tell David to call me.
Oh, I guess David? Nine one one was like a symphony. Someone wrote the script, the scenario and the plane, and it needed various experts and participants. They had to be coordinated. The key problem for Al Qaeda sitting in a cave in Afghanistan is coordination. It couldn't be done from Afghanistan. It had to be done domestically from Canada. A Canadian-controlled company had sabotage vulnerability testing contracts given it by the federal government at a number of key places that were targeted on 911. The construction office of the Department of the Interior that awarded the contracts, and the contracts including sabotage vulnerability testing on Wedge 1 of the Pentagon containing the U.S. Naval Command Center, a major strategic asset. So this company, controlled out of Canada, presumably by the Canadian Intelligence Services, was engaged in sabotage testing in a building and an area which was actually sabotaged. They also were awarded the contract for taking away the evidence of the debris.
Grab the money, grab the money, grab the money. Take it out of your hand, take the purse, take the purse.
They were very busy in New York too on that day. On the morning of 9/11, they were engaged in sabotage vulnerability testing in building number 7 of the World Trade Complex. It was demolished at 5:20 p.m. on the afternoon of September the 11th.
Hi there. Field?
Yeah, it's Field again.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have my ringer turned on, so I see this little flashing red light on the tip of my phone.
Okay.
I think we've got levels good. Anyway, last night was a revelation.
Good.
So here's the question. You say we know that flight 750, we know that a 757 did not hit the Pentagon.
Right.
Concisely, how do we know that it wasn't a 57?
Because the 757 could not have performed the maneuver immediately prior to the penetration of the Pentagon.
Okay, so it descends. Okay, let me stop you. It descends from 7,000 feet above the Pentagon, makes a very steep nosedive, and then levels out at 10 feet and goes for a pretty considerable distance at 10 or 15 feet above the ground.
Yeah, okay. Are you trying to record me now?
I am recording you, Field.
Okay, well, just tell me when to go. My understanding of the trajectory of the aerospace vehicle that crossed the Pentagon at 7,000 feet, then commenced a rapidly descending right-hand turn. I believe the G loading on the wings of the 757 would have been more than the airplane was capable of bearing.
Okay, stop right there. So you're saying that if a 757, and probably, if I know what you've said previously, even a 737, a smaller plane, if it had made that type of maneuver, it would have ripped the wings off the plane even before it got down to that Pentagon level, right?
It would have been either or. It would either rip the wings off the airplane or they wouldn't complete the turn and the descent before they hit the ground. In other words, the airplane was not capable of that type of performance.
Okay. And we know that this is the flight trajectory from radar records and from not only radar, but people just there on the scene who watched the plane come in, right?
Right. And the official records that I would refer to are the Washington Center FAA air traffic control sequences of radar film.
I don't know the specific person, but do you recall a quote of somebody watching the radar of that vehicle coming in saying, "This has got to be a military vehicle"?
Yes, I can't put my finger on that, but I've heard that also that they being the approach controllers at Washington Reagan Airport, as they watch this radar track proceed inbound towards the Pentagon, the controllers themselves were aware of two things: that whatever was doing this type of flying had to be a military, i.e. non-civilian aircraft, and secondly, a woman air traffic controller from Washington Approach Control was caught on tape on 9/11 stating that American 77 had been lost over the Atlantic 45 minutes prior to the events at the Pentagon.
Mark Burnback, a Fox employee, is on the phone with us. Mark witnessed this from what we understand. Mark, were you close enough to be able to see any markings on the airplane?
Hi, gentlemen. How you doing? Yeah, there was definitely a blue logo with like a circular logo on the front of the plane, definitely towards the front. It definitely did not look like a commercial plane. I didn't see any windows on the sides, and definitely very low. And I'm completely panicked. I'm freaking out. I can't believe what I just saw.
We are all shaken by this. We are watching the video now back live. But the upper floors of the World Trade Center in Manhattan in flames now after apparently two large airplanes, we're talking about jetliners here, slammed into the sides right around 9 o'clock this morning. Mark, if what you say is true, those could be cargo planes or something like that. You said you didn't see any windows in the side?
I didn't see any windows on the sides. I saw the plane flying low. I was probably like a block away from the subway in Brooklyn, and that plane came down very low. And again, it was not a normal flight that I've ever seen at an airport. It was a plane that had a blue logo on the front, and it did not look like it belonged in this area.
That depends on the G loading of the flying platform. And when I say flying platform, that means, for the sake of this episode, I believe it was a Navy A3 Sky Warrior, and I believe that from the dynamics and the trajectory, I believe it would have had a 4G turn, or perhaps a little more.
But what does that mean, 4G? That if somebody weighs 200 pounds, they would suddenly weigh 800, they would weigh 4 times as much, 800 pounds?
Yes, a G is just like right now, wherever you're at, in Omelet Town, you're under the influence of 1G.
Okay.
The pull of gravity. When you accelerate vertically in an airplane, or if you roll over to the side and accelerate horizontally, but basically if you pull back on the stick or the yoke, you increase the effects of gravity, and airplanes such as the A3 could probably take about 4 Gs, and keep in mind, it very possibly was reinforced at Fort Collins, where it could take more Gs.
Okay.
But an airliner like a 757 or a 737 probably could only take about 2.5 Gs, and if it was being flown by technology.
If they tried to fly more than 2 Gs, the plane would just fall apart, wouldn't it?
Yes, the wings would be stressed to the point of fracture.
Okay, gotcha. All right, but I'm asking again about would a pilot flying at, you said 4 Gs, heading virtually straight for the ground, would this pilot be able to, if there was a pilot on that plane, are they likely to actually even remain conscious?
If there was an inexperienced pilot trying to fly the trajectory of the flying object that did in fact hit the Pentagon, if that was an inexperienced pilot, the 4G G loading of the maneuver would cause him to be spatially disoriented, and there's no way in the world that a low-time pilot flying an airplane he has no experience in could do a 4G turn for 270 degrees and then roll out 15 or 10 feet above the ground and maintain a constant altitude for the length of a football field as it flies into a building.
And not to mention that the target is the office that's controlling our side of the war games that morning.
Right.
Yeah, this is beyond even the remotest bit of credibility.
It's technologically impossible with a human pilot.
Yeah, okay.
Even an experienced 757 pilot, if there's a 757 pilot out there somewhere that you could find rather than the random one that just happened to have that flight that day, or the Muslim who allegedly took the airplane over, no pilots, whether they're American, United, Delta, no U.S. airline pilot would have experience flying 540 knots below 10,000 feet because it's illegal to do so.
Yeah.
That's not to say that they couldn't knowingly and willfully break the law and fly 540 knots at 10 to 15 feet, but they'd have no experience in having done that, and so they could not have displayed the level of precision that was displayed on 9/11 when the flying object went squarely through the window of the Naval Command Center. That had to be technology flying the flying object, and it's my opinion that the flying object was a privately owned A3 Sky Warrior.
I previously commented that when you're trying to solve a mystery, whether you're Sherlock Holmes or a pilot, a good place to start is to take the official story and eliminate anything that's impossible. The QRS-11 gyro chip was built to be installed in Maverick missiles, which could certainly do this. Boom. And there's your answer. It was not a transport category airplane. It was certainly not American 77. And if any pilot out there could fly this platform in a transport, I'd sure like to shake your hands and go for a ride.
The final moments of Flight 93 are nowhere near what was reported both by the media and by Hollywood. The final moments of Flight 93, as observed by numerous eyewitnesses, included the 757 flying perfectly inverted, straight and level, at treetop level, which is impossible due to the wing loading and the negative G loading of Flight 93, a 757. But more startling is what the eyewitnesses also observed. Flying very close to the inverted Flight 93 was a small white jet with upturned winglets and two rear-mounted engines that looked military. There was, other than the white paint, there was no markings, there was no flag, there was no company name. And shortly after the inverted 757 passed by Susan M. and the gentleman farmer, they heard a loud explosion, and the 757, which was vaporized at treetop level, left an 8-mile debris field, including one engine at one end of the debris field and a small circular hole at the other end.
How big was this hole in the ground?
How big was it? I don't even remember.
Now, do you recall any big parts of the plane, like wings, fuselage? Did they recover any big pieces of that plane?
I can give you something good for take there.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Of course I'm ready.
After studying the final moments of Flight 93 for 5.5 years, my only knowledge of any remnant that's identifiable is one engine was left at one end of the 8-mile debris field. My only knowledge of any remnant that's identifiable is one engine was left at one end of the 8-mile debris field.
These planes, and I think in every case, the plane essentially vaporized.
That's right.
In every case, there were no bodies, there were no seats, there were no big pieces of planes. To me, I draw the analogy between a firecracker. What would cause these planes to act more like firecrackers as opposed to a regular jet? What would allow these planes to vaporize either on impact or at a chosen time, such as Flight 93 would have done?
Pre-placed explosives that appear to be insulation. So what I'm suggesting is that well-intentioned technicians at aircraft modification factories, thinking they're sticking insulation in, either sound absorbing or vibrational insulation or thermal insulation, these well-meaning technicians could in fact be installing sheets of explosives, and there's pictures of that on the web at Hawks Cafe.
Solid rocket looks and behaves exactly like insulation until it's ignited at this tremendous
1,500 degrees.
Yeah, in other words, you could crash a plane into a building,
right,
and it still wouldn't ignite this solid rocket fuel to explode, but you could ignite it with a separate a separate ignition source, at which point then the solid rocket fuel installed as retrofitted insulation would then ignite.
That's right.
And what this brings to mind is the footage that I got from Dylan Avery, which shows this flash occurring as the second plane hits the Twin Towers.
Right.
You see the secondary flash like a missile or something, that's happening as the plane is entering the building.
Right.
It's almost like a missile is being fired into the building that will then ignite some other ignition source. We are conjecturing that will then ignite this retrofitted solid rocket fuel insulation.
Right.
And cause the kind of explosion that we see on rocket liftoffs when solid rocket fuel explodes. Okay, hear about the fireball. We see the planes go into the building and there's this big, would a jet, even when it was filled with rocket fuel, going into a building, would you expect to see that kind of fireball from jet fuel alone in that type of situation?
No. Jet fuel has a very high flash point, and so just like diesel fuel on the over-the-road truckers, they can get in terrible collisions, and yet they generally don't catch on fire. And the same is true of jet fuel because of the nature of the mission, which is to haul people safely in steel or aluminum enclosures flying 500 miles an hour. The fuel has to be very stable, and being very flammable would be a hazard, so it's as inflammable as it can be made.
Jet fuel and kerosene are virtually the same thing, right?
Yes, jet fuel and kerosene.
Right, so kerosene and jet fuel, they don't cause this fireball like gasoline would.
No, it wouldn't.
You got to have something else igniting something else to make that big, showy movie fireball, right?
That's what I would suggest. You need an ignition source.
If you look closely, you'll notice that the shadow of the plane meets the building after the flash occurs. This means that the flash is not the fuselage colliding with the building, but rather a separate event. Not to mention that the flash is twice as wide as the fuselage itself. Within minutes of the attack, news teams from all over the city had their cameras trained on the World Trade Center. Therefore, the second impact was covered by almost every conceivable angle. This footage was shot by CNN. On the underside of the fuselage, an extra piece of equipment is visible. When questioned about this, Boeing representatives refused to discuss it. This is what the underside of a Boeing 767 should look like. The following footage is taken from the documentary Why the Towers Fell. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Bring it back. Did you catch that? A missile is fired seconds before impact. Skeptics claim that the flash is the fuselage colliding with the building. If that were the case, it would look like this. Flash is also present in footage taken by Evan Fairbanks, Jennifer Spell, and CNN. Al-Qaeda certainly couldn't have added this equipment at Logan International Airport. And even if they did, the flight crew would have noticed it. So where did this plane come from?
I would just like to introduce the terminology of the Common Operational Picture. Okay, initials are COP or COP, and the Common Operational Picture is a term that the military uses.
Okay.
That if you're going to carry out a tactical exercise or a major battlefield campaign, your commanders have to have the Common Operational Picture, which is what all the assets and all the enemy locations and all your special weapons and tactic teams are doing. They have to have it to execute the mission successfully. They have to have access to the Common Operational Picture. The Common Operational Picture is assembled by having on-scene commanders. You've talked about the small white jet. That is an on-scene commander. The trailer outside the Pentagon looks to be like another on-scene commander. The Boeing AWACS NATO system with the rotating dome is another one. We think there were some ships offshore that were also gathering information and sending it via satellite to a command post, probably in Canada. And a virtual war room is a space in cyberspace, if you will, and it might be a room, but it's more likely just to be a computer. And there is a group of people looking at the computer, and on that computer is developed a common operational picture which identifies all the assets of the red team and all the positions of the blue team and whether or not the blue team is vulnerable. So the perpetrators of 9/11 would have been the people who had access to the common operational picture for the war games. alleged to be Flight 175 at 1,000 feet, 350 knots, just struck the second tower where the black smoke from the inefficient fire in the first tower is still visible. Here it is again, striking a second time. This time we can see at the end of the red arrow a small white jet, perhaps a CL-604. The third time it strikes, and this time the small white jet is more plainly visible, and it appears to be in a left-hand, shallow climbing left-hand turn. And from the next couple of pictures, we will see some shadows. There they are. There's a shadow amidships on the right side of the fuselage and a shadow at the tail, and that's created because it's in a left-hand turn, and the sunlight is no longer reflecting off the side of the airplane. It's being shadowed by the upraised wing. Once again, the variant of the 767 has struck the building. We know from scientific research and knowledge that the jet fuel, if it was mixed properly with oxygen or air, it would not have that black smoke. The black smoke is indicative of a fairly cool fire that's inefficiently burning the jet fuel, which really throws a lot of doubt onto the official story that the fuel was so intense that it melted the steel structures that held up the 1,365-foot average twin towers. I'm more of a peaceful person, but sometimes I get put into positions where you can't be peaceful, and so then you either have to be a victim or a victor. And I've decided that being a victim is not a very good deal, so rather than start things, I'm a finisher. Like in baseball, they have finishers that somebody else pitches for 7.5 innings and the finisher goes in. So here it is, 5.5 years after 9/11, and I'm hoping to finish this off for the 3,000 victims. The paraphrase of a great French journalist, there is nothing more powerful than the truth which time has come.
That was very interesting. Another perspective, because even myself, like I'm open to being wrong on certain things, and so was it a missile? Was it a smaller plane that was remote operated? I think further investigation absolutely needs to be done, and uh, and so this does make a lot of sense. So again, there's just so many more questions than there are answers regarding what actually happened on 9/11. But what we do know that this was a staged and planned event. There were controlled demolitions used, explosives that were tested, that the materials were sold to China within 2 weeks, and there were people within academia that were even suing because they wanted to do research on these materials, and that was taken away from them. And then even for the families of the people, the heroic people who died on that day, they have been wanting answers for, again, over 2 decades now. And so, again, a lot more information coming out. Hopefully, I do know that I forget what senator it is. Oh my goodness, Ron Johnson. But anyways, one of the senators is pushing for an additional investigation to be done because the NIST report, the National Institute of Science and Technology, they completely falsified their report. That is clear. And they didn't even mention, again, the controlled demolitions of Building 7, the explosives. And we know that steel, how it melted, it would be impossible with the jet fuel that was used, and the concrete that was melted, and even the materials that were used on these steel beams that had fire protection, etc. And so, yeah, I did share another video from Hibbler Productions the other day, and I've posted the original video, and I just really encourage people to take a look at that link. It's from a video that's over 5 years old at this point, which is why I shared it, because it only has a little over 100,000 views. And to me, that's wild. Like this channel, like Hibbler Productions with Sean Hibbler, he's a friggin' legend. He is one of the GOATs when it comes to documentaries regarding so much truth within the world. And he's the one that created Level Earth, Level with Me, etc., etc. And these are incredible videos or documentaries, whatever you want to call them. And so if you click on that link from that video that I shared, he gets all the credit for that, and the people that he was working with, including Dave Weiss and Eric Dubay and countless others. And again, he has multiple other videos, and it's not even just about the Earth. It's also about the Challenger event. It's about the pandemic, and so many other videos, even actually on the Lahaina wildfires. And so I cannot take credit for his work. I just like sharing it because he deserves to have more recognition. And so on that note, I will leave it at that. Again, I didn't have any more chats. Actually, maybe I'll show you what I mean by it. It's a total unique chatters this month. And so I'm supposed to get unique chatters, not by video, but by user. And so if people have like commented on my live feeds before, no matter how many times they comment afterwards, and again, I encourage and welcome that, because I have people that have been watching my channel for many years, and they comment often, but they don't count on unique chatters. And so I only have 3 unique chatters this month. And for some reason, if I don't get 20, again, this is all new, then I'm not going to be a Rumble content creator anymore. And so I do know, and this is not to throw shade, but I do know that there are people that watch my videos, and they do take my content and my work and my research, and they use it as their own. It happens a lot. And so they're obviously not going to comment. And so it takes people that are unique, genuine followers who are not here just to take my content and then utilize it for their own channels or social media platforms to allow me to continue on. And yeah, so on that note, I will leave it at that. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.